The lecture hall buzzed with the usual mix of excitement and nervousness that came with combat strategy class at the Galactic Defense Academy. Students from dozens of species filled the tiered seating, their various forms creating a colorful mosaic of the galaxy's diversity. At the front, Professor Kethare, a distinguished Valerian with crystalline features, tapped his teaching rod against the holographic display. "Today, we begin practical combat simulations," he announced, his voice carrying the authority that came from centuries of military experience. "You will be divided into pairs for week-long survival exercises in our combat dome. The rules are simple. Last one standing wins." Maya Chen sat in the back row, her small human frame easily overlooked among her larger classmates. At barely 5 feet tall, with dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, and wearing the standard academy jumpsuit, she appeared unremarkable. The only hint of her unusual background was the slight callus pattern on her hands, and the way her eyes constantly scanned the room, cataloging exits and potential threats. 3 rows ahead, Zarek Prime flexed his massive shoulders and turned to smirk at his friends. The Corvan warrior stood nearly 8 feet tall, his reptilian features scarred from countless battles on his homeworld of Corva 7. His species were known throughout the galaxy as apex predators, their world a harsh environment of volcanic mountains and acid seas that had forged them into perfect killing machines. "Look at all these soft-worlders," Zarek rumbled to his companions, his voice carrying easily through the hall. "This will be easier than hunting tunnel worms back home." His gaze swept over the other students dismissively, the Aquari with their delicate blue skin and gill slits, the Centaurian twins with their multiple arms but peaceful nature, the lone ethereal whose gaseous form barely held together in the artificial atmosphere. And then, his eyes landed on Maya. Zarek's laugh was like grinding stone. "They're really scraping the bottom of the gene pool now. Look at that tiny thing. What is she, some kind of maintenance worker who wandered into the wrong room?" His friends joined in the laughter. Vex 9, a cybernetically enhanced humanoid from the machine worlds, clicked his mechanical fingers. "Probably can't even lift a standard plasma rifle. I heard humans are from some backwater planet no one's even cataloged properly," added Thresh, an insectoid whose species specialized in hive warfare. "Probably lives on one of those garden worlds where the biggest threat is running out of flower nectar." Maya kept her expression neutral, but her fingers tightened slightly on her data pad. She'd heard variations of these comments since arriving at the Academy 6 months ago. Earth wasn't even on most galactic maps, and when it was, it carried the designation Quarantine World, Extreme Hazard Classification. But that information was restricted to upper-level military personnel. Professor Kethare's voice cut through the chatter. "Pair assignments are now displayed. You have 1 hour to prepare before transport to the combat dome." The holographic display flickered, showing names in glowing text. Maya scanned the list and found her name paired with Zarek Prime. Around her, other students began chattering excitedly or nervously about their assignments. Zarek stood up, his massive form casting a shadow over several rows. Well, he called out, loud enough for half the hall to hear. "Looks like I got paired with the human pet." He turned to face Maya directly, his predatory grin showing rows of serrated teeth. "Don't worry, little one. I'll try to make this quick and painless. Though I can't promise anything. Corvan hunting instincts are hard to suppress." Several students laughed nervously. Maya simply nodded and began gathering her things. As she stood, Zarek's voice boomed again. "Actually, this might be fun. Tell you what, human, since you're so obviously outclassed, how about we make this interesting?" He spread his arms wide, addressing the entire hall. "Last one standing wins, right? I'll give you a full-day head start in the dome. Find whatever hiding spots you want. Set whatever little traps your soft-world mind can imagine. When I come hunting, at least you'll have had time to prepare your final prayers." The hall went quiet. This wasn't just arrogance anymore. This was a public humiliation. Professor Kethare frowned but said nothing. The challenge was within Academy rules, and students were expected to handle their own conflicts. Maya slung her pack over her shoulder and walked down the stairs toward the exit. As she passed Zarek's row, she stopped and looked up at him. Her voice was quiet, but in the silence of the hall, everyone heard her clearly. You're very confident for someone who's never seen a real fight. Zarek's grin widened. Oh, little human, you have no idea what a real fight looks like. Where I come from, we hunt creatures that would tear apart your entire species before breakfast. I've killed things with my bare hands that your worst nightmares couldn't imagine. Where I come from, Maya said, her tone unchanged. Everything is trying to kill you. And the things that aren't trying to kill you are usually the most dangerous of all. She continued walking toward the exit, leaving Zarek laughing behind her. But Vex-9's enhanced sensors caught something the others missed. The human's heart rate hadn't increased at all during the confrontation. If anything, it had slowed down. The Academy's combat dome was a marvel of engineering, capable of simulating any environment in the known galaxy. For their exercise, it had been configured as a dense jungle world with Earth-like gravity and atmosphere. The dome stretched for miles in every direction, complete with rivers, cliffs, caves, and a complex ecosystem of holographic wildlife. Maya stood at the insertion point, checking her gear one final time. Standard Academy equipment, basic shelter materials, water purification tablets, emergency rations for 3 days, a single energy blade, and a locator beacon for emergencies. No ranged weapons, no advanced technology. Survival skills and intelligence were the primary tests. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply, letting the familiar sense of jungle air fill her lungs. It reminded her of the Amazon basin, though this simulation lacked the subtle wrongness that made Earth's environments so dangerous. No hidden toxins in the air, no parasites in the water, no plants that could kill you just by touching them. The transport platform hummed to life, and Maya felt the familiar sensation of matter-energy conversion as she was inserted into the dome. She materialized on a small clearing near a stream, surrounded by dense vegetation that rose like green walls on all sides. 24 hours. Zarek had given her a full day to prepare, probably thinking he was being generous. In reality, he had no idea what he'd just done. Maya moved through the jungle like a ghost, her small size allowing her to navigate spaces that would challenge larger beings. But, more than that, she moved with the unconscious efficiency of someone who had spent their entire childhood in environments where a single mistake meant death. Earth was unique in the galaxy. Most worlds that developed intelligent life were either garden worlds with minimal threats, or harsh environments that killed off complex life before it could evolve. Earth was different. It was a world that had nearly killed off its intelligent species dozens of times, only to have them survive and adapt and grow stronger. Humans had evolved alongside creatures that made Corvin hunters look like house pets. They had survived ice ages and volcanic winters, plagues that killed 90% of their population, and natural disasters that would have rendered most species extinct. They had turned their own world into a training ground, and then conquered it so thoroughly that they had to create their own challenges to keep growing. But more than that, humans had developed something unique. The ability to look at any environment, no matter how hostile, and find a way to not just survive, but thrive. Maya found what she was looking for after 2 hours of careful scouting, a section of the jungle where a stream had carved out a small canyon with multiple levels and plenty of cover. She spent the rest of her preparation time turning it into a maze of misdirection and carefully prepared surprises. She didn't build obvious traps. Those would be too easy for a Corvin warrior to spot. Instead, she created subtle modifications to the environment. A log positioned to create a false path that led to a dead end. Rocks arranged to channel movement in specific directions. Branches bent and repositioned to create blind spots and choke points. But, most importantly, she studied the terrain until she knew every rock, every tree, every possible approach and escape route. She mapped sound patterns and wind currents, identified which surfaces would muffle footsteps and which would amplify them. As the sun set on her preparation day, Maya settled into her chosen position and waited. She didn't sleep. Humans could go days without sleep when necessary, another adaptation their death world had forced upon them. Instead, she entered a state of relaxed alertness that would let her react instantly to any threat. The next morning brought the sound of Zarek's entry into the dome. Even from miles away, Maya could hear him. He made no attempt at stealth, crashing through the undergrowth like the apex predator he believed himself to be. Little human, his voice boomed across the jungle. Ready or not, the hunt begins. Maya smiled grimly. She had been ready for a very long time. Zarek moved through the jungle with the confidence of a creature that had never been prey. On Corva 7, he was the thing other creatures feared. His enhanced senses could track the smallest movements. His strength could tear through most materials. And his speed was phenomenal for something his size. He followed the human's trail easily at first. She had made no attempt to hide her passage during her preparation day, probably too panicked to think clearly. The track led toward the canyon area, which made sense. Humans were supposed to be clever despite their physical weakness. She would probably try to use the terrain to her advantage. As he drew closer to the canyon, Zarek slowed his pace slightly. Not from caution, but to savor the moment. He wanted the human to hear him coming, wanted her to experience the full terror of being hunted by a superior predator. "I can smell your fear, little one," he called out, though in truth he couldn't detect any scent at all. The human seemed to have vanished entirely once she reached the rocky terrain. It's intoxicating. On Corva, we have a saying, "Fear seasons the meat." He stepped into the canyon and immediately felt the difference in the environment. The air was cooler here, and the sound of the stream created an acoustic backdrop that would mask smaller noises. Smart, but not smart enough. Zarek chose the most direct path along the stream, his clawed feet finding easy purchase on the wet rocks. He moved with casual arrogance, occasionally calling out taunts that echoed off the canyon walls. He never saw Maya at all. She watched him from a carefully chosen position 30 feet above, her body pressed flat against a narrow ledge that was invisible from the ground. Her breathing was controlled, her heartbeat steady. Every muscle was relaxed but ready to explode into motion. Zarek was impressive by galactic standards. His movement showed the fluid grace of a natural predator, and his alertness was constant. He would have been a formidable opponent in most environments, against most species, but he had no conception of what it meant to hunt or be hunted on Earth. Maya had spent her childhood in environments where apex predators were just another part of the ecosystem you had to account for. She had learned to move through territories controlled by creatures that could track scents across miles, hear heartbeats from hundreds of feet away, and see in spectrums humans couldn't even perceive. Compared to a Bengal tiger or a Nile crocodile, Zarek was actually relatively easy to read. She waited until he was directly below her, then dropped silently to a ledge 15 feet behind him. Her landing was absorbed by carefully positioned moss that she had prepared the day before. Even if Zarek's hearing was enhanced, the sound was lost in the natural ambient noise of the stream. Now came the real test. Maya began to follow him. For the next hour, she maintained a position between 10 and 20 feet behind the Corvan warrior, matching his pace exactly. When he paused to examine the terrain, she froze. When he called out another taunt, she used the echo to mask the tiny sounds of her movement. It was a technique human hunters had developed over millennia, persistence hunting, not trying to overpower the prey, but simply wearing it down through relentless pressure and superior endurance. But Maya wasn't hunting Zarek yet. She was learning him. She studied his movement patterns, his reaction times, his blind spots. She noted which direction he favored when choosing paths, how he held his head when listening, the slight tell in his posture when he was about to change direction. Most importantly, she confirmed what she had suspected from the beginning. Zarek had never been prey before. His senses were designed to find and track others, but he had no instincts for detecting when he was being tracked himself. After an hour of observation, Maya began the next phase. She started leaving signs of her presence, but not where Zarek expected them. While he searched the ground for footprints, she left a single thread from her jumpsuit caught on a branch 15 feet above his head. While he checked caves and hiding spots at ground level, she disturbed a bird's nest in the canopy, sending a few feathers drifting down in his peripheral vision. Slowly, subtly, she began to turn the hunter into the hunted. Zarek's confidence began to waver by the third hour. The human's trail had vanished completely when she reached the rocky terrain, which he had expected. But now he was seeing signs of her presence that made no sense. How had she gotten threads caught that high in the trees? When had she been close enough to disturb that bird's nest? And why did he have the growing feeling that he was being watched? "Clever little mouse," he called out, though his voice lacked its earlier boastfulness. "Playing hide and seek won't save you forever. When I find you, your games will only make your defeat more educational." But even as he spoke, doubt crept into his mind. This wasn't how hunts were supposed to go. The prey was supposed to run in panic, making noise, and leaving obvious trails as terror overwhelmed rational thought. They weren't supposed to vanish like smoke and then reappear in impossible places. Maya watched from her new position as confusion and frustration began to war with Zarek's natural arrogance. Perfect. An overconfident predator was dangerous, but predictable. A confused and frustrated one made mistakes. The psychological warfare was just beginning. By midday, Zarek's hunt had become a nightmare of misdirection and mounting paranoia. Every time he thought he had found Maya's trail, it vanished into impossibility. Footprints that led to sheer cliff faces. Disturbed vegetation that formed no coherent path. Signs of her presence that appeared and disappeared like hallucinations. The Corvin warrior stood in a small clearing, his massive chest heaving with frustration rather than exertion. His enhanced senses, which had never failed him before, seemed useless against this tiny human who moved like a ghost through terrain that should have been impossible for her to navigate. "This is impossible," he snarled, his voice echoing off the canyon walls. No soft-world weakling could evade a Corvin hunter this long. Above him, Maya clung to the underside of a natural stone bridge, her fingers and toes finding purchase on irregularities in the rock that most beings wouldn't even notice. She had been there for 20 minutes, watching Zarek pace in circles below, and her position was so precarious that most species would have fallen within seconds. But humans had evolved from creatures that spent their lives climbing through forest canopies, and Maya had grown up in environments where the ability to cling to impossible surfaces could mean the difference between life and death. Her muscles had been conditioned since childhood to maintain static holds that would exhaust most beings in minutes. More importantly, she was beginning to understand something that Zarek couldn't possibly comprehend: the true nature of human patience. Zarek had been shaped by a world where hunts ended quickly. His prey either escaped in the first few minutes or died. The concept of a pursuit that could last for hours, days, or even weeks was foreign to his psychology. He was already showing signs of the mental fatigue that came from sustained stress. Maya, on the other hand, had been raised on stories of human hunters who tracked prey across continents, who could maintain focus and determination for months if necessary. Her ancestors had developed agriculture not because they were too weak to hunt, but because they were such efficient hunters that they needed sustainable food sources to supplement what they could kill. As Zarek moved out of the clearing, Maya shifted her position with fluid precision, following him along routes he couldn't see. She had been implementing a strategy that human military commanders called the long game, wearing down an enemy's psychological defenses before engaging in direct confrontation. The next phase would push Zarek's frustration into something more dangerous: desperation. Maya began to get closer. Not close enough for direct confrontation, but close enough for Zarek's enhanced senses to occasionally detect her presence. A whisper of movement in his peripheral vision that vanished when he turned to look. The faint scent of human sweat that appeared and disappeared on shifting wind currents. The almost silent sound of displaced pebbles that could have been natural settling or could have been footsteps. Each incident was ambiguous enough that Zarek couldn't be certain he wasn't imagining it. But, cumulatively, they created a mounting sense of being stalked by something just beyond the edge of perception. Humans called it psychological pressure, and it was a technique they had refined over thousands of years of warfare against enemies that were often larger, stronger, and better armed than they were. The first sign that the strategy was working came when Zarek began talking to himself. "She's just lucky," he muttered, scanning the trees above him with jerky, paranoid movements. Soft-world cowered hiding in the rocks like a tunnel worm. "When I find her, I'll make her scream loud enough for the whole academy to hear." But his words lacked conviction now. The easy confidence of the morning had eroded into something that sounded more like whistling in the dark. Maya continued to shadow him, gradually decreasing the distance between them. 20 feet became 15, then 10. She was close enough now that if Zarek had been a human, he would have sensed her presence through the subtle evolutionary instincts that had kept her species alive on a world full of predators. But Zarek wasn't human. He had been shaped by a world where he was always the predator, never the prey. His instincts were calibrated for hunting, not for survival. As the afternoon wore on, Maya began to implement harassment tactics that would have been familiar to any student of human guerrilla warfare. When Zarek stopped to drink from the stream, she sent a small rock slide cascading down the cliff face 50 yards behind him. When he paused to examine what he thought was her trail, she disturbed a bush just outside his field of vision. Each incident was minor, but they came with perfect timing to disrupt his concentration and keep his stress levels elevated. She was conditioning him to expect attacks that never came, training him to jump at shadows that might or might not be real. By late afternoon, Zarek was beginning to show signs of genuine psychological distress. His movements had become erratic, alternating between aggressive surges and nervous pauses. He was talking to himself constantly now, his words becoming increasingly agitated. "Come out and fight, coward. Face me like a warrior instead of skulking in the shadows like some parasitic cave crawler." Maya smiled grimly. Perfect. Now came the most dangerous part of her plan. She was going to make him angry. Humans had learned long ago that an angry enemy was a careless enemy. Rage clouded judgment, disrupted tactical thinking, and led to mistakes that could be exploited. The trick was making someone angry enough to be stupid without making them so enraged that they became unpredictably dangerous. Maya dropped down to ground level for the first time since the hunt began, landing in a clearing that Zarek had already searched twice. She moved quickly but deliberately, leaving obvious signs of her presence. Clear footprints in the mud, broken branches, even a small piece of torn fabric from her jumpsuit. Then, she climbed back into the canopy and waited. It took Zarek 20 minutes to circle back to the clearing. When he saw the obvious trail, he stopped dead, his massive frame trembling with fury. "Games," he roared, the sound echoing off the canyon walls like thunder. "Soft-world games. I am Zarek Prime of the Corvin Deep Hunt. I have killed void serpents with my bare hands. I will not be mocked by some crawling insect from an unmapped world." He charged forward, following the trail with reckless abandon. Maya watched from above as he crashed through undergrowth that she had carefully prepared, stepping directly onto weak ground that she had identified during her reconnaissance. The trap wasn't meant to seriously injure him. That would have violated academy rules and probably gotten her expelled. But when his massive weight hit the undermined section of stream bank, the ground gave way and dumped him into a shallow pool with a tremendous splash. Zarek emerged from the water streaming mud and vegetation, his dignity as thoroughly soaked as his equipment. His roar of fury could probably be heard for miles. "I know you're watching," he bellowed at the trees. "Show yourself. Fight me." Maya obliged him. She dropped from the canopy into the clearing, landing 30 feet away with the fluid grace of someone who had been climbing since childhood. For the first time since the hunt began, hunter and prey faced each other directly. The size difference was absurd. Zarek stood over 8 feet tall and weighed perhaps 4 times what Maya did. His claws could tear through steel, and his reflexes were enhanced to superhuman levels. He was armed with natural weapons that had evolved specifically for killing, while Maya carried only a simple energy blade that looked like a toy in comparison. By any reasonable standard, the fight should have been over in seconds. Zarek's grin returned, though it was now twisted with rage and humiliation. Finally, he hissed, water still dripping from his scales. "No more running. No more hiding. Just you, me, and the law of the strongest." Maya said nothing. She simply stood there, relaxed but alert, her hand resting casually on the handle of her energy blade. Her breathing was steady, her heartbeat calm. She looked completely, utterly unafraid. That should have been Zarek's first warning. "Any last words, little human?" he asked, flexing his claws. Maya tilted her head slightly, studying him with the detached interest of a scientist examining a specimen. When she finally spoke, her voice was conversational, almost friendly. "Do you know what the most dangerous predator on Earth is?" Zarek blinked, confused by the unexpected question. "I don't care about your pathetic humans," Maya interrupted. The answer is humans. We're not the biggest, or the strongest, or the fastest. But we're the most dangerous because we're the only species that hunts purely for the challenge of it. She paused, letting that sink in. Every other predator hunts for food, or territory, or mates. We hunt because we can, because we're bored, because something looked at us wrong, and we decided to make it extinct. Zarek charged. His movement was explosive, covering the 30 feet between them in less than 2 seconds. His claws extended to their full length, designed to disembowel prey with a single swipe. His reflexes were enhanced to the point where he could react to threats that moved faster than most beings could even perceive. Maya wasn't there when he arrived. She had moved at the last possible second, not away from his charge but to the side and slightly forward. The motion required perfect timing and absolute confidence in her own abilities. Most beings would have hesitated, would have moved too early and telegraphed their intentions. But Maya had grown up dodging creatures that made Zarek look slow. As he thundered past, she drew her energy blade in a smooth motion and made a single, precise cut across the back of his left knee. The weapon sliced through his natural armor like it wasn't there, severing tendons with surgical precision. Zarek crashed to the ground as his leg buckled, rolling through the mud and coming up in a defensive crouch. He whirled to face Maya, confusion and pain warring with rage in his expression. She stood exactly where she had been before, her blade already sheathed, hands at her sides. The entire exchange had taken less than 3 seconds. "That's not possible," Zarek snarled, trying to put weight on his injured leg and failing. "You're too slow, too weak. Speed isn't about how fast you can move," Maya said calmly. "It's about being in the right place at the right time. Strength isn't about how hard you can hit. It's about hitting the right target." She began to circle him slowly, her movements casual but purposeful. "Do you know why humans dominated Earth? It wasn't because we were stronger than the creatures we competed with. We were weaker than most of them. But we were smarter, more patient, more adaptable." Zarek twisted to keep her in sight, favoring his injured leg. His enhanced senses were finally registering what they should have detected from the beginning. Maya's heartbeat was still perfectly calm. Her breathing was still controlled. She wasn't experiencing combat stress at all. She was enjoying this. "We didn't just survive on a death world," Maya continued, her voice taking on an almost lecturing tone. "We conquered it. Every ecosystem, every environment, every niche. We went from hiding in caves to standing at the top of the food chain in less than 100,000 years." She paused in front of him, just outside his reach. "And then we got bored. So we started hunting each other." Zarek lunged again, this time with more caution but no less determination. His claws swept in a defensive pattern designed to catch her no matter which direction she moved. Maya went under the attack, dropping into a slide that carried her beneath his guard. Her blade flickered out again, this time opening a precise cut along his right bicep that severed the muscle group responsible for extending his claws. She was back on her feet, and out of range before Zarek even realized he'd been cut. "What are you?" he gasped, staring at his now useless arm. "I'm what happens when evolution gets creative," Maya replied. "Humans aren't just adapted to survive on a death world. We're adapted to turn any world into a death world." This time she came to him. Her attack was unlike anything Zarek had ever seen. She didn't charge in a straight line or rely on brute force. Instead, she moved in a complex pattern that seemed to bend space around her, appearing and disappearing from his peripheral vision like a living shadow. When she struck, it was with the accumulated knowledge of every martial art, every fighting style, every combat technique that humanity had developed over millennia of constant warfare. Her blade found gaps in his natural armor that he didn't even know existed, opening cuts that were individually minor but collectively devastating. Zarek tried to grab her, to use his size advantage to crush her against his body. But trying to catch Maya was like trying to catch smoke. She flowed around his attacks like water, always exactly where he couldn't reach her. Within minutes, he was bleeding from a dozen precisely placed cuts. None were immediately life-threatening, but each one robbed him of mobility, strength, or coordination. Maya was systematically dismantling him with the clinical precision of a surgeon. "This isn't how fights work," Zarek wheezed. backing away from her on unsteady legs. "You can't just— This isn't a fight," Maya said, her tone patient and educational. "This is a demonstration. You wanted to know what happens when a human decides to hunt something." She gestured to his battered form. "This is what happens." Zarek's legs finally gave out, and he collapsed to the ground, his massive frame shaking with exhaustion and blood loss. He looked up at Maya with something that might have been respect warring with disbelief. "How?" he whispered. Maya knelt beside him, pulling medical supplies from her pack. Despite everything, she began treating his wounds with the same clinical precision she had used to inflict them. "Because humans don't just adapt to their environment," she said as she worked. "We adapt our environment to us. We don't just survive predators. We turn them into pets, or food, or entertainment. We don't just endure harsh climates. We build cities in them and call them home." She finished applying a trauma patch to his worst cut and sat back on her heels. "Your people became apex predators on your world. That's impressive. But humans became apex predators on every world. We're not from a planet of hunters. We're hunters who happen to evolve on a planet." Zarek stared at her, finally, beginning to understand the magnitude of what he had challenged. "What are you going to do now?" he asked. Maya smiled, and, for the first time, it was genuinely warm. "Now I'm going to help you get to the medical station, and then we're going to file our reports. You fought well, once you stopped underestimating your opponent." She stood and extended her hand to help him up. "And maybe next time, you'll think twice before taunting someone just because they look harmless. On Earth, we have a saying. It's the quiet ones you have to watch out for." The medical bay at the Galactic Defense Academy buzzed with activity as Maya helped Zarek onto one of the treatment beds. The Corvin warrior's injuries were extensive but not life-threatening, thanks to Maya's precise control during their confrontation. Dr. Zila, 9, a tall, multi-armed healer whose species specialized in emergency medicine, immediately began scanning Zarek's wounds with obvious concern. "What happened in there?" the doctor asked, her four eyes focusing independently as she examined the cuts. "These injuries show remarkable precision, almost surgical in nature." Zarek looked at Maya, who simply shrugged. "Training accident," he said finally. "I underestimated the terrain." Dr. Zila 9's expression suggested she didn't entirely believe that explanation, but medical ethics prevented her from pushing for details. She began treating Zarek's wounds while Maya sat in a nearby chair, filling out the required post-exercise reports. Word of the simulation results had already begun spreading through the academy. Within hours, a small crowd had gathered outside the medical bay, consisting mainly of students who had witnessed Zarek's public challenge in the lecture hall. The whispered conversations carried a mix of disbelief, curiosity, and newfound respect for the quiet human who had apparently accomplished the impossible. Professor Kethare arrived as the medical treatment was concluding, his crystalline features reflecting the harsh medical bay lighting. He carried a data pad containing the complete sensor logs from the combat dome, and his expression was deeply troubled. "I need to speak with both of you," he announced, gesturing toward a private consultation room. "Miss Chun, Mr. Zarek Prime, please follow me." The consultation room was small and sterile, designed for confidential discussions between faculty and students. Professor Kethare activated a privacy field and settled into his chair, studying the data pad with obvious concern. "The sensor logs from your exercise make for interesting reading," he began, his voice carefully neutral. "They show a hunt that lasted approximately 14 hours, during which Miss Chin remained undetected for the vast majority of the time, followed by a confrontation that lasted exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds. He looked up at Maya, his ancient eyes sharp with curiosity. "According to the biometric sensors, your heart rate never exceeded normal resting parameters. Your stress hormones remained at baseline levels. Your breathing pattern showed no signs of exertion or fear. In 14 hours of being hunted by one of our most formidable students, you showed less physiological stress than most beings experience during a routine medical examination." Maya met his gaze steadily, but said nothing. "More interesting still," the professor continued, "are the recordings from the final confrontation. Miss Chun, the combat analysis computers are having difficulty categorizing your fighting style. It appears to incorporate elements of approximately 47 different martial traditions, many of which the database cannot identify. He tapped the data pad thoughtfully. Your movements show reaction times that should be impossible for an unaugmented being of your size and species. Your tactical awareness suggests training that typically requires decades to develop. And your precision with that energy blade exceeds what we normally see from students who have been studying weapons work for years. Zarek shifted uncomfortably on the examination bed. Professor, I can confirm that she fought with skills far beyond what any academy training could have provided. Indeed, Professor Kethare agreed. Which brings me to my primary concern. Miss Chun, your admission records indicate that you come from a world designated as Sol 3 or Earth. However, when I attempted to access more detailed information about your planet's classification, I encountered security restrictions that require clearance levels far above my authority. He leaned forward, his expression intensely curious. What exactly is Earth, Miss Chun? Maya was quiet for a long moment, considering her response. Finally, she looked at both the professor and Zarek. Professor, how familiar are you with the galactic classification system for planetary environments? Quite familiar. I helped develop the current standards. Then, you know that most worlds fall into one of three basic categories. Garden worlds, where evolution produces primarily peaceful species. Resource worlds, which are harsh but predictable. And failed worlds, where conditions prevent the development of complex life. Professor Kethare nodded. A vast oversimplification, but essentially correct. Earth doesn't fit into any of those categories, Maya said. It's classified as a Death World Class 12. The professor's crystalline features went completely still. Zarek looked confused. Professor, he asked, what's a Death World classification? Professor Kethare was silent for several seconds before responding, his voice carefully controlled. The Death World classification is a restricted category used for worlds that are so hostile to life that they should theoretically be incapable of producing intelligent species. There are only 14 such worlds currently cataloged in the galaxy, and most are considered scientific curiosities. He looked at Maya with something approaching awe. Class 12 is the highest rating on the scale. It indicates a world where every ecosystem is actively hostile to complex life, where survival requires constant adaptation to multiple simultaneous threats, and where the indigenous species are considered too dangerous for general contact. Too dangerous? Zarek asked. Species that evolve on death worlds develop extreme survival characteristics, the professor explained. Enhanced aggression, paranoid levels of threat assessment, and combat capabilities that make them unsuitable for integration into galactic civilization. Most Death World species destroy themselves before achieving space travel. Maya smiled grimly. Humans came very close to proving that theory correct. Multiple times. Professor Kethare pulled up additional files on his data pad, his movements quick and urgent. According to these restricted records, Earth's environment includes predatory wildlife that hunts in organized packs, atmospheric conditions that can shift from life-supporting to lethal within hours, geological instability that produces planet-wide extinction events every few thousand years, and bacterial organisms that can adapt to any environment and kill most known life forms. He paused, scrolling through more information. It also notes that the dominant species has developed something called recreational violence, organized combat for entertainment purposes, and has turned hunting into an art form rather than a survival necessity. That's insane, Zarek whispered. How does anything survive on a world like that? By becoming more dangerous than everything else, Maya replied simply. Humans didn't just adapt to Earth's environment. We conquered it. We turned every hostile ecosystem into our territory. We made pets out of predators, food out of natural toxins, and homes in places that should have killed us. She gestured to herself. I grew up in what humans call the Amazon rainforest. It's a jungle ecosystem where nearly everything that moves can kill you, where the plants are toxic, where the water carries parasites that can eat you from the inside, and where the air itself can harbor diseases that have no known cure. Professor Kethare's data pad chimed with an incoming priority message. He read it quickly, his expression growing increasingly concerned. Miss Chun, I'm receiving an urgent communication from Academy Command. It appears that word of today's exercise has reached certain parties in galactic military intelligence who have been monitoring your progress. Maya sighed. I was wondering when they'd make contact. You knew this would happen? Professor, humans have been aware of galactic civilization for quite some time. We've been preparing for eventual contact for decades. My presence at this academy isn't accidental. The door to the consultation room chimed, and Professor Kethra granted entry. 3 beings entered. A tall, imposing figure in a galactic military uniform that Maya recognized as Admiral Vexare of the Defensive Council. A smaller being whose species Maya didn't recognize, but whose equipment marked him as intelligence. And a human woman in her 50s wearing the simple gray uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps. Miss Chun, the human woman said with a warm smile. I'm Ambassador Sarah Chun. Yes, we're related, though distantly. I'm here representing Earth's interests in this matter. Admiral Vexare stepped forward, his expression stern but respectful. Miss Chun, your performance in today's exercise has raised significant concerns within the Galactic Defense Council. We need to discuss Earth's status and humanity's potential role in galactic security. Maya looked around the room, taking in the assembled beings with the calm assessment that had served her so well in the combat dome. I assume this means humanity's quarantine period is about to end? Ambassador Chen nodded. The Galactic Council has been debating humanity's integration into galactic civilization for some time. Your demonstration today has accelerated that timeline considerably. The intelligence operative spoke for the first time, his voice carrying a mechanical translation that indicated he was using a universal communicator. Miss Chun, our analysis of the combat recordings indicates that you were operating at perhaps 20% of your actual capabilities. Is this assessment accurate? Maya considered the question carefully. I was instructing, not fighting. If I had been genuinely threatened, the encounter would have ended very differently. Zarek made a choking sound. 20%? You dismantled me using 20% of your abilities. You're a skilled warrior, Zarek, but you've never faced real danger. You've never had to fight something that was actively trying to kill and eat you since the moment you were born. It's not your fault. Your world produced apex predators, but it also gave you the luxury of being the most dangerous thing in your environment. She turned back to the Admiral. Humans never had that luxury. On Earth, everything wants to kill you. The weather, the plants, the animals, the bacteria, even other humans. We developed our combat capabilities because the alternative was extinction. Admiral Vexare consulted his datapad, clearly uncomfortable with what he was reading. According to our xenobiological assessments, the average human possesses reaction times, endurance capabilities, and tactical intelligence that exceed galactic military standards by significant margins. More concerning, your psychological profile suggests that humans view combat as a form of recreation. We call it sports, Maya confirmed. And yes, we fight for fun. We also fight for food, territory, mates, political differences, religious beliefs, economic advantages, and sometimes just because we're bored. This presents a significant concern for the Galactic Council, the intelligence operative said. A species that treats violence as entertainment and possesses enhanced combat capabilities could destabilize the existing power structure. Ambassador Chen spoke up, which is why Earth has been working on integration protocols for the past 30 years. Humans understand that our unique characteristics require careful management in a galactic context. She gestured to Maya. Miss Chen here is part of the first wave of cultural ambassadors. Young humans who have been specifically trained to interact with galactic civilization while demonstrating that humanity can be a positive force for galactic security. Professor Kethra, who had been quietly listening to the entire exchange, suddenly spoke up. Miss Chun, may I ask what Earth's long-term goals are regarding galactic civilization? Maya was quiet for a moment, considering her answer carefully. Professor, humans have always been explorers. We've covered every inch of our planet, mapped every ocean, climbed every mountain, and explored every environment. Now we're looking at the stars. She gestured toward the viewport that showed the Academy's orbital station hanging in space above the planet below. We don't want to conquer the galaxy. We want to explore it. We want to see what's out there, meet new species, learn new things, and face new challenges. But we also want to protect it. Protect it from what? Admiral Vexare asked. From the kinds of threats that a galaxy full of garden world species isn't equipped to handle. Humans have experience dealing with existential threats, with hostile environments, with situations where everything goes wrong at once, and you still have to find a way to survive. She stood up, moving to the viewport, and looking out at the stars. Every species in this galaxy has specialized in something. The Valorians became master engineers. The Aquari developed telepathic communication. The Corvin species became perfect hunters. But no one specialized in pure survival. Maya turned back to face the room. That's humanity's contribution to galactic civilization. We're the species you call when everything else has failed, when the situation is hopeless, and when someone needs to walk into hell and come back with a solution. Admiral Vexare exchanged glances with the intelligence operative, then nodded slowly. Miss Chun, the Galactic Defense Council is prepared to offer humanity provisional membership in the galactic community with full military partnership status. Your species would be given autonomy in your home system and would be called upon to assist with situations requiring unconventional solutions. And in exchange? Ambassador Chen asked. Humans would agree to certain restrictions on expansion and would submit to monitoring of your military capabilities. Additionally, human military personnel would be integrated into galactic defense forces at appropriate levels. Maya looked at her distant relative, who nodded subtly. On behalf of Earth, I accept those terms, Maya said. With one modification. Which is? Maya smiled. And, for the first time since meeting her, both Professor Kethare and Admiral Vexare felt a small chill of unease. Humans don't submit to monitoring. We participate in mutual observation and information sharing. The distinction might seem small, but it's important to us. After a moment, Admiral Vexare nodded. Acceptable. As the formal negotiations continued, Zarek struggled to process everything he had learned. The small, quiet human he had taunted in class wasn't just skilled beyond his understanding. She was a representative of a species that had conquered one of the most hostile worlds in the galaxy, and was now preparing to take their place among the stars. He thought about his boasts regarding tunnel worms and void serpents, creatures he had considered terrifyingly dangerous just that morning. Now they seemed like house pets compared to what Maya had casually described as normal childhood experiences. Maya, he said quietly during a break in the negotiations, what's the most dangerous thing you've ever encountered on Earth? Maya thought for a moment. Other humans, she said simply. Everything else is just environmental hazards. Humans are the only species on Earth that actively tries to improve their ability to kill things. She paused, then added with a slight smile, though I have to admit, some of our insects can be pretty impressive. Remind me to tell you about Australian spiders sometime. Zarek decided he didn't want to know. As the meeting concluded and the various officials departed to begin the formal integration process, Maya and Zarek found themselves alone in the consultation room. The Corvin warrior was still processing everything he had learned, his entire worldview fundamentally altered by a single day's experience. Maya, he said finally, I owe you an apology. A significant one. She shook her head. You acted according to your understanding of the situation. On your world, you were right. You probably are the most dangerous thing around. You just had the bad luck to encounter something from outside your normal parameters. Is this what humans call mercy? He asked. Defeating an enemy but choosing not to destroy them? Partly, Maya agreed. But it's also practical. You're a skilled warrior, Zarek. Your species will be valuable allies as humanity integrates into galactic civilization. Destroying you would have been wasteful. She stood to leave, then paused at the door. Besides, you fought well once you adapted to the situation. That's a rare quality, even among humans. I suspect you'll do better in future encounters. As Maya left the medical bay, she reflected on the day's events. The confrontation with Zarek had been inevitable from the moment she had enrolled at the academy. Humans had always faced skepticism and underestimation when encountering new civilizations. It was, in many ways, their greatest tactical advantage. But, more than that, the exercise had served its intended purpose. Earth's integration into galactic civilization was no longer theoretical. Humanity was about to take its place among the stars, bringing with them all the terrifying, wonderful, and utterly human characteristics that had allowed them to conquer the most dangerous world in the galaxy. The quiet girl from the back row of combat strategy class was ready to help her species make their mark on the universe. And the universe, for better or worse, was about to discover what happened when evolution got truly creative. In his quarters that night, Zarek composed a message to his clan brothers on Corva 7. It was a simple message, but one that would circulate through Corvan military networks for generations to come. Today I learned that there are hunting grounds in this galaxy that make our homeworld look like a nursery. The humans have arrived, and we are no longer the apex predators we thought we were. But perhaps that is not such a terrible thing. Today, I was defeated by something stronger, faster, and more dangerous than anything our world ever produced. And somehow, I am still alive to tell this tale. That, I think, says something important about what kind of species humanity truly is. The message concluded with a single line that would become a standard warning in Corvan military manuals. Never taunt the Deathworld girl. You will not get back up.